On a quiet evening in Atlanta, an 18-year-old girl was walking home, unaware that her life was about to change forever. Within minutes, she was surrounded by police, handcuffed, and accused of a crime she didn't commit. But what the officers didn't realize? The badge hidden in her backpack was real, a CIA badge. How will she fight back against this injustice, and will the system finally admit its mistake? Stay tuned, because this is a story you won't believe. Before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Naomi Fletcher walked briskly through the bustling streets of Atlanta, her mind racing with excitement. It had been a long day, but she didn't feel tired. How could she? She had just received her official acceptance letter to Spelman College, a place she had dreamed of attending since she was a child. Not only that, but she had earned a full-ride scholarship, a testament to her relentless hard work and determination. Her mother, Denise Fletcher, had cried when she read the letter that morning. "Baby, I knew you could do it. You worked too hard for this," Denise had said, wiping away tears as she pulled Naomi into a tight hug. "I just can't believe it's real," Naomi had whispered, holding on to her mother tightly. "We don't have to worry about tuition, Mom. It's all covered." Denise sniffed, cupping her daughter's face. "You're gonna change the world one day, Naomi. I just know it." Now, walking home after school, Naomi replayed that conversation in her mind, feeling a deep sense of pride. She had spent years perfecting her skills in STEM, leading her school's robotics team, and excelling in every subject. But there was one thing about her life that nobody, aside from her mother, knew. She was part of a classified internship program with the CIA. It had started a year ago, when Naomi was scouted at a national coding competition. A recruiter from the agency, a woman named Agent Camille Brooks, had approached her afterward, intrigued by Naomi's ability to break encryption patterns in record time. The conversation had changed everything. "Naomi, have you ever considered working for the government?" Agent Brooks had asked casually, though there was nothing casual about the sharp glint in her eyes. No," Naomi had replied hesitantly. "I mean, I like tech and cybersecurity, but government work, that's intense." Brooks had smiled. "We have a special program for young talents like you, a way to develop your skills while also serving a greater purpose. It's classified, of course, but it could open doors for you bigger than anything you've ever imagined." At first, Naomi thought it was some kind of joke. But when she received a non-disclosure agreement, NDA, in the mail, a week later, along with a letter on official CIA letterhead, she realized it was very, very real. Now, months into her training, she carried an official CIA internship badge in a hidden compartment in her backpack. It wasn't a full clearance badge, nothing like what field agents carried, but it identified her as part of a high-potential outreach program designed to cultivate young minds in national security. She wasn't supposed to talk about it. Not to her friends, not to her teachers. The only person who knew was her mother. "Always keep it hidden, Naomi," Agent Brooks had warned her. "You don't want to attract unnecessary attention." Naomi followed that rule religiously. The badge stayed zipped away, tucked between her schoolbooks and laptop. It was just a piece of plastic, yet it represented everything she had worked for. As she stepped off the MARTA bus, the evening air was crisp, the sky painted with streaks of pink and orange. Her neighborhood wasn't fancy, but it was home. The small apartment she shared with her mother might not have been much, but it was filled with love. She was supposed to meet her mother for a celebration dinner, maybe a stop at their favorite diner for burgers and fries. But that dinner would never happen, because within minutes, her life was about to turn upside down. Naomi adjusted the straps of her backpack as she stepped off the bus, stretching her arms after the long day. The evening air was cool, the sky above, painted in streaks of soft pink and orange. Just a few more blocks, and she'd be home, ready to celebrate with her mother. As she walked past a gas station, she debated stopping for a drink. She had been running on nothing but school cafeteria food and caffeine all day. With a sigh, she turned toward the entrance, stepping inside. The buzzing fluorescent lights cast a stark glow over the small store. The air smelled of old coffee and cleaning supplies. Naomi grabbed a bottle of iced tea from the cooler, heading toward the register. The clerk, a middle-aged white man with thinning hair, barely looked at her as she placed the drink on the counter. "That all for you?" he asked, monotone. "Yeah," Naomi replied, pulling out her debit card. As she paid, she noticed a tense conversation happening at the front of the store. A man in a dark jacket, someone she hadn't noticed before, was speaking in low, urgent tones to a police officer just outside. Their body language was stiff, alert. Naomi glanced over, just as the clerk handed her the receipt. "You good?" she asked, half joking. The clerk didn't answer. Naomi shrugged and turned to leave. That's when it happened. "Hey, you stop right there!" The sharp command made her freeze. Her heartbeat spiked as she turned around. Two uniformed officers were already approaching, hands resting on their holstered weapons. Behind them, the man in the dark jacket, who she now realized was an undercover federal agent, was speaking rapidly into a radio. "Me?" Naomi asked, bewildered. "Hands where we can see them," one of the officers barked. Her stomach lurched. "What? I didn't do anything," she stammered, instinctively raising her hands. The gas station clerk had gone pale, looking between Naomi and the cops, like he wasn't sure what was happening. "You match the description of a suspect in an ongoing investigation," the second officer said. Naomi's pulse roared in her ears. "Suspect? Investigation? I don't know what you're talking about," she said, forcing herself to stay calm. "I literally just walked in here to buy a drink." The first officer ignored her. "Do you have any weapons on you?" "No," Naomi said quickly. "Turn around, hands behind your back." Her breath hitched. "Oh my God. This isn't happening. This isn't happening." "Sir, please," she tried again. "This is a mistake. I can show you my ID." Before she could react, one of the officers grabbed her wrist and yanked her arms behind her back. "You have the right to remain silent," he said, as cold metal cuffs snapped around her wrists. Pain shot up Naomi's arms as the cuffs tightened. "What is happening?" she cried out. "I didn't do anything." She glanced at the clerk desperately, but he only stood there wide-eyed, frozen in place. The second officer grabbed her backpack and unzipped it roughly. Naomi panicked. "Hey, wait! You can't just—" The officer wasn't listening. He dug through her books and notebooks, tossing them onto the ground like they were trash. Then he froze. The moment stretched. Slowly, the officer pulled out her CIA badge. The plastic ID glinted under the store's fluorescent lights, the unmistakable seal of the Central Intelligence Agency printed in the corner. His expression darkened. "What the hell is this?" he asked. Naomi swallowed hard. "It's—" She hesitated. She wasn't supposed to talk about it. She wasn't supposed to say anything. But right now, what choice did she have? "It's real," she said finally. "I'm part of a government internship program. You can call and check." The officer snorted. "Yeah, right. You're telling me an 18-year-old girl is carrying around a CIA badge?" The undercover agent stepped closer, taking the badge from the officer's hand. His sharp eyes flickered over the ID, then back at Naomi. "Where did you Get this, he demanded. I told you, Naomi said, her voice trembling. It's mine. The first officer scoffed. This is a fake. Probably something you printed off the internet to scam people. It's not fake, Naomi snapped. Her outburst earned her a hard shove forward. Watch your tone, the officer growled. Tears burned at Naomi's eyes. This wasn't happening. This wasn't real. The undercover agent turned to his radio. We'll verify it at the station, he said. Take her in. Naomi's stomach plummeted. No, wait. She tried again. Please, just call someone. Check my records. Call my mom. I didn't do anything. Her pleas fell on deaf ears. The officers dragged her toward the squad car, ignoring the few onlookers who had stopped to stare. Somewhere in the back of her mind, Naomi heard a woman's voice, one of the customers maybe, muttering, Poor girl. I hope she makes it out okay. But the officers didn't care. They shoved her into the back seat, slammed the door, and in that moment, Naomi knew her life had just changed forever. Naomi sat on the cold metal bench of the holding cell, her wrists aching from the tightness of the cuffs. The air smelled like sweat and stale coffee, and the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, making everything feel surreal, like a bad dream she couldn't wake up from. Her mind raced. She had been falsely accused, handcuffed, and shoved into the back of a police car. No one had listened to her. No one had cared when she said she had proof of where she had been. Now, she was stuck in a concrete box, surrounded by women who either looked just as scared as she felt, or completely numb to their surroundings. She clenched her fists, trying to stay calm. Think, Naomi. Think. She had one phone call, one chance. But the officers hadn't let her make it yet. Suddenly, the metal door creaked open. A tall black woman in plain clothes stepped inside, her badge clipped to her belt. Unlike the other officers, her expression wasn't filled with disdain. Instead, there was something in her eyes, something like doubt. Naomi Fletcher? She asked. Naomi sat up straight. Yes, she said, her voice cracking. Please, you have to listen to me. I didn't do anything. They won't let me call my mom. The woman raised a hand. Slow down. I'm Detective Renee Mitchell. I've been assigned to look into your case. Naomi's heart pounded. Someone was finally paying attention. Detective, please, she said, leaning forward. This is a huge mistake. I was coming home from school. I have teachers, classmates, a bus driver, so many people who can confirm I wasn't anywhere near that crime. Mitchell nodded, arms crossed. And the CIA badge. Naomi swallowed hard. It's real, she said firmly. I'm part of a classified government internship program. If you just call, Mitchell sighed. That's going to be tricky. They don't just confirm things like that over the phone, you know. Naomi felt her stomach drop. But it's true, she insisted. There has to be a way. Mitchell studied her for a moment, her gaze unreadable. Look, kid, she finally said, lowering her voice. I've been in this department long enough to know when something doesn't sit right. And your arrest. It doesn't sit right with me. Naomi held her breath. But I can't just take your word for it. I need to verify everything. Your school records, your internship, even the so-called eyewitness who supposedly identified you. Please, Naomi whispered. Just hurry. Mitchell exhaled, tapping a pen against her notepad. I'll do what I can. But until then, you're stuck here. Naomi felt like she'd been punched in the gut. Mitchell gave her a small nod before turning toward the door. I'll check your alibi first. If your story checks out, we'll talk. Then she was gone. Naomi slumped against the cold wall, tears burning in her eyes. She thought about her mother. Denise had to be worried sick by now. She thought about her dreams, Spelman College, the CIA, everything she had worked for, and how easily it could all be ripped away by a single false accusation. She had never felt so powerless in her life. The shackles around Naomi's wrists felt heavier than before as she was led down the long, sterile hallway toward the courtroom. Her heart pounded in her chest, each step echoing off the cold tile floors. She had barely slept in the holding cell the night before, too busy replaying the nightmare over and over in her head. This wasn't just a hearing. It was the moment that could determine her entire future. She tightened her jaw, trying to steady her breathing. When they pushed open the double doors, Naomi's stomach clenched. The room was already filled with people. The judge sat high on the bench, looking serious and unimpressed. The prosecution team was already seated, led by Assistant District Attorney Daniel Moore, a tall man with a sharp suit and an even sharper gaze. And then she saw her mother. Denise Fletcher sat in the front row, hands clasped tightly in her lap. Her eyes were red from crying, but when she met Naomi's gaze, she lifted her chin slightly, a silent show of strength. Beside her stood Walter Grayson, Naomi's lawyer, a seasoned defense attorney with graying hair and an intense focus. He gave her a small nod as she was led to her seat. All rise. The judge entered, and everyone stood before settling again. Naomi's hands trembled slightly as she folded them in her lap, her wrists still sore from the cuffs. Moore wasted no time. He rose from his seat, his voice loud and clear. Your Honor, the defendant, Naomi Fletcher, was apprehended near the scene of an ongoing federal investigation into a credit card fraud ring. She matched the suspect description, and upon search was found carrying an illegitimate identification badge claiming affiliation with the CIA. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Naomi clenched her fists. Illegitimate? Due to the suspicious nature of this so-called badge, and given the fact that she was found in the vicinity of the crime, we request that the charges proceed and that bail be denied. Moore finished, glancing at the judge with confidence. Naomi's stomach twisted. Grayson stood next, adjusting his tie as he stepped forward. Your Honor, the prosecution's argument is built entirely on assumptions and a lack of verification, he said smoothly. My client, an 18-year-old honor student, was returning home from school when she was falsely identified as a suspect. She was in no way involved in any fraudulent activity, and we have multiple sources who can confirm her alibi. The judge studied Grayson carefully, then turned to Moore. Does the prosecution have direct evidence placing Miss Fletcher at the scene of the crime? Moore hesitated. We have an eyewitness who identified her as matching the suspect's description. Grayson let out a sharp breath. An eyewitness? That's it? He turned to Naomi. Miss Fletcher, where were you at the time of the alleged crime? Naomi sat up straighter. I was at school, she said clearly. I was in class all day, and after school, I attended a robotics club meeting. I took my usual bus home, like I do every day. Grayson nodded. We have her attendance records, testimonies from her teachers and classmates, and security camera footage from the bus she took home that evening. The prosecution has nothing but a vague description from an unreliable eyewitness. Moore shifted uncomfortably. The fact remains that she was found in possession of a CIA badge, which we believe to be fraudulent. The room fell silent. The judge turned to Naomi. Miss Fletcher, can you explain the badge? Naomi swallowed hard. She wasn't supposed to talk about it. She had signed an NDA. She wasn't allowed to disclose any details about her internship. But if she stayed silent now, she could lose everything. She reached into her lap, where her real badge had been placed, after the officers confiscated it. With steady hands, she held it up. "This badge is real," she said, her voice clear and unwavering. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Even more seemed momentarily caught off guard. "I am part of a classified government internship program that works with the CIA. My involvement is legitimate, and my badge was issued to me directly by the agency." "Do you have proof?" the judge asked. For a moment, Naomi's heart plummeted. The agency never confirmed identities publicly. She had called Agent Camille Brooks from the holding cell, but she had only gotten her voicemail. Would they back her up, or would they leave her to fend for herself? Suddenly, the courtroom doors opened. A woman in a navy blue suit strode in, her expression unreadable. "Agent Brooks." "Your Honor," she said, her voice smooth and professional. "My name is Camille Brooks, and I am a senior liaison officer with the Central Intelligence Agency." Silence. Moore turned pale. "I am here to confirm that Miss Naomi Fletcher is, in fact, part of a classified training initiative under the CIA's High Potential Outreach Program," Brooks continued. Naomi felt her breath catch. The judge raised an eyebrow. "Are you saying the badge is legitimate?" Brooks nodded. "Yes, Your Honor. This young woman has been falsely accused, and her identification should never have been called into question in the first place." The room exploded into murmurs. Moore's expression darkened, but he knew there was nothing left to argue. The judge tapped her gavel. "In light of this new information, I see no basis for continuing the charges against Miss Fletcher. The court dismisses the case immediately." Naomi's shoulders sagged in relief. Her mother let out a sob of joy, rushing forward to embrace her as the bailiff removed Naomi's shackles. "Baby, I knew you didn't do this," Denise whispered, hugging her tightly. Naomi buried her face in her mother's shoulder, feeling the first real sense of hope she'd had in days. She had won her freedom, but deep down, she knew this wasn't over yet. Naomi stepped out of the courthouse into the crisp Atlanta air, her hands still trembling from the shock of everything that had happened. She was free. The judge had dismissed the charges, but as she looked around at the reporters swarming outside, microphones and cameras flashing in her face, she knew this was far from over. "Miss Fletcher, how does it feel to have the charges dropped? Are you really affiliated with the CIA? Do you plan to take legal action against the police department?" Naomi's throat tightened. She had barely processed her own emotions, let alone thought about the next steps. Before she could speak, her lawyer, Walter Grayson, stepped in. "Miss Fletcher will not be making a statement at this time," he said firmly, guiding her away from the chaos. Her mother, Denise Fletcher, gripped her hand tightly as they wove through the crowd. "Let's get you home, baby." Naomi nodded, grateful. But even as they drove away, the fire inside her burned hotter. That night, Naomi sat in her living room, staring at the news coverage. Her face was plastered on the screen, her case already stirring debate across the country. 18-year-old Naomi Fletcher, a promising student and CIA intern, was falsely accused and arrested earlier this week in connection to a credit card fraud case. Today, her charges were dropped after a shocking courtroom revelation confirmed her government affiliation. However, many are now questioning the actions of the officers involved in her arrest, as well as the broader implications of racial profiling in law enforcement. The anchor continued, but Naomi had stopped listening. Her mother sighed from the couch beside her. "I knew they'd turn this into a spectacle." Naomi turned to her lawyer. "What happens now?" Grayson leaned forward, hands clasped. "That depends on you." "What do you mean?" "You could walk away," he said. "The charges are dropped. You're free." You could move on, start college, focus on your future. Naomi felt a pang of guilt at the thought, but she couldn't just walk away. And if I don't? She asked. Grayson studied her. Then we fight. Denise tensed beside her. Fight how? We sue, Grayson said simply. Wrongful arrest, racial profiling, emotional distress. We expose these officers for what they did, not just to Naomi, but to everyone else they've hurt. Naomi's heart pounded. This wasn't just about her anymore. The next morning, Naomi and Grayson met with Detective Renee Mitchell at a small coffee shop in downtown Atlanta. The detective had been the only officer who had shown her any kind of fairness, and now Naomi needed answers. I know those officers have done this before, Naomi said, stirring her untouched cup of coffee. I want to prove it. Mitchell sighed, glancing around as if making sure no one was listening. You're not wrong, she said. Those two, O'Donnell and Marston, they have a history. Of what? Falsifying reports, padding their arrest numbers. They target people they know can't fight back. Young black men and women, immigrants, people who don't have the resources to get a good lawyer. Naomi felt sick. So, why hasn't anyone stopped them? Mitchell hesitated. Because this department protects its own. Naomi's fingers tightened around her cup. That ends now. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Naomi worked with Grayson and Mitchell to gather evidence, reaching out to other victims who had been wrongfully arrested by the same officers. At first, people were hesitant, afraid to come forward. But Naomi's case had sparked something. Slowly, one by one, people began to talk. A college student falsely accused of shoplifting. A young mother detained for matching a suspect's description. A high school boy who had been arrested on planted evidence. Their stories were eerily similar, different circumstances, same corrupt officers. Naomi knew they had enough to build a case. Then, the threats started. Late-night phone calls with no caller ID, whispered warnings to drop the lawsuit. Even her mother got a cryptic letter telling her Naomi was playing with fire. Denise was terrified. But Naomi? Naomi was furious. They want me to be scared, she told her mother one night. They want me to shut up. Denise grabbed her hands. I don't want to lose you, Naomi. Naomi softened, squeezing her mother's hands back. I know, Mom, but I have to do this. Denise sighed but nodded. Then we do it together. The lawsuit rocked the city. The D.C. Police Department tried to suppress the case, but the media was already watching. Then, the breakthrough came. Travis Brown, the supposed eyewitness, flipped. Faced with perjury charges, he confessed the truth. He had been paid by officers O'Donnell and Marston to falsely identify Naomi. And he wasn't the first. The city exploded. O'Donnell and Marston were suspended, pending an internal investigation. The police department scrambled to save face, but it was too late. Naomi had started something they couldn't ignore. One night, as Naomi sat at her desk, her phone buzzed. Agent Camille Brooks. Naomi hesitated before answering. Naomi, Brooks said. I wanted to check in on you. I'm okay, Naomi said. A pause. You've made a lot of noise. Naomi swallowed. Am I in trouble? Brooks let out a soft chuckle. Not from us. But let's just say, the agency prefers to stay out of the spotlight. I didn't ask for any of this. I know. Brooks hesitated. But I'm proud of you. Naomi felt her chest tighten. So, I still have my internship? For now, Brooks said. But tread carefully. Some fights are worth having. Some aren't. Naomi stared out the window. This one is... Brooks was silent for a moment. Then good luck, Naomi. I have a feeling you'll need it. The line went dead. Naomi set her phone down, taking a deep breath. She wasn't scared anymore. This fight was just beginning. The summer heat hung heavy over Atlanta as Naomi walked up the steps of Spelman College, the historic institution she had dreamed of attending since she was a little girl. The campus was buzzing with energy, filled with students hauling suitcases, laughing, and greeting each other for the first time. For a moment, Naomi just stood there, taking it all in. She had fought so hard for this moment, and now she was finally here. It had been a whirlwind of a summer since the lawsuit. After Travis Brown's confession, the city had no choice but to act. Officers O'Donnell and Marston were arrested, charged with falsifying evidence, perjury, and obstruction of justice. Naomi watched the trial unfold on TV. The same courtroom where she had once fought for her own innocence, now housing the very men who had tried to destroy her life. The prosecution had more than enough evidence. Detective Renee Mitchell testified about the pattern of wrongful arrests. Other victims came forward, sharing stories just like Naomi's, stories that had never made the news. In the end, the jury found both officers guilty. The city settled the civil lawsuit, awarding Naomi a substantial amount, enough to pay for college without loans and help her mother get out of debt. But money had never been Naomi's goal. What mattered most was justice, and she had won. The first week at Spelman was a blur of introductions and orientations. Naomi quickly bonded with her roommate, Shanice, a sociology major who had recognized her from the news, but thankfully didn't make a big deal about it. "Girl, I know who you are," Shanice had said, setting down a box of books. "But I promise I'm not going to ask you a million questions unless you want to spill the tea." Naomi had laughed for the first time in weeks. "Thanks, I appreciate that." She was ready to just be a student, to go to class, to make friends, to finally move past the nightmare that had consumed her life. But deep down, she knew she'd never truly leave it behind, because some things change you forever. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Naomi sat on the steps outside the library, flipping through a book on cryptography. She had been avoiding her phone all day, trying to enjoy the simple pleasure of being a normal college student. But when she finally checked it, a single missed call sent her heart racing. "Agent Camille Brooks." Naomi hesitated before calling back. "Naomi," Brooks answered on the first ring. "Agent Brooks," Naomi replied, her voice careful. A pause. Then a hint of amusement in Brooks' tone. "You can just call me Camille now. You're not being investigated anymore, remember?" Naomi exhaled a laugh, shaking her head. "Guess I'm still getting used to that." "I wanted to check in on you," Brooks said. "See how you're settling in at Spelman." "It's been good," Naomi admitted. "Weird, but good." "Weird how?" "Weird as in, I went from being falsely arrested to being called a whistleblower in the media. Some people think I'm a hero. Some think I was just stirring up trouble. And now, I'm here, trying to act like all of that didn't just happen a few months ago." Brooks was silent for a moment. "You didn't just stir up trouble, Naomi. You forced people to see something they wanted to ignore. That's powerful." Naomi swallowed. "I didn't do it to be powerful. I did it because it was right." Brooks chuckled softly. "Exactly. That's what makes you dangerous." Naomi frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" Brooks' voice took on a more serious tone. "The agency doesn't usually get involved in local cases like yours. But when I brought your situation to my superiors, they kept watching, and they were impressed." Naomi sat up straighter. "With what?" "With you." Her stomach flipped. "What are you saying?" Brooks sighed. "I'm saying the CIA doesn't forget people like you. You're smart, you're resourceful, and you don't back down from a fight. You have something that can't be taught. Naomi didn't know what to say. Are you offering me a job? She finally asked. Brooks laughed. Not yet. You still have school to finish. But let's just say your future with us isn't over. Naomi felt a strange mix of relief and apprehension. So, the internship is still mine? If you want it, Brooks confirmed. Naomi closed her eyes for a moment, thinking back to everything that had led her here. The handcuffs, the fear, the anger, the fight, and now, the freedom. I want it, she said firmly. Brooks hummed in approval. Good. I'll be in touch then. Enjoy college, Naomi. You earned it. The line went dead. Naomi stared at her phone, the screen still glowing in the fading sunlight. For the first time in a long time, she felt in control again. She wasn't just a girl who got arrested. She wasn't just a victim of injustice. She was something more, a fighter, a survivor. And now, someone who had a future she controlled. With a deep breath, she put her phone away, stood up, and walked back toward her dorm. Her past had tried to break her, but her future? That was hers to build. Naomi's story is more than just a legal battle. It's a powerful reminder of the realities of injustice, racial profiling, and the importance of perseverance. It highlights how quickly misjudgments can derail someone's future, but also how determination, truth, and the right support system can turn the tide. One of the biggest lessons we can take from her experience is the importance of knowing our rights. If you ever find yourself in a wrongful accusation situation, stay calm, assert your legal rights, and seek proper representation. Document everything, and if possible, gather evidence. Video recordings, witness statements, and official records can make a difference in proving the truth. Naomi's story also teaches us about resilience. Instead of letting the injustice break her, she fought back, not just for herself, but for others who had suffered similar mistreatment. We must recognize that change happens when people refuse to stay silent. Lastly, this story reminds us to support those who are unjustly accused. Whether through legal aid, advocacy, or simply raising awareness, small actions can lead to big changes. Justice is not automatic. It's something we must actively fight for. If you were in her shoes, what would you do? Would you choose to stand your ground and fight for justice, even if it meant facing risks and public scrutiny? Or would you lay low, accept the system's mistakes, and try to move forward quietly too, to avoid further trouble? Comment 1 or 2 below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And if you found this story inspiring, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share to support the channel. Your voice matters, just like Naomi's did. ***.